So when I was pretty young, somewhere around 10 maybe, I went to a wedding with my family, and I don't recall anything at all about this wedding whatsoever except one thing. Someone my dad knows told us a joke, and I spent the rest of the evening laughing at this joke. I actually worked really hard in my head that night, going through the joke over and over again, making sure I remembered it. So I've been retelling this joke for somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 years, and over that time I've kind of expanded it and tried to make it my own to an extent. And I started doing some Google searches just to see if I could find it, find somebody else telling this joke, and I couldn't. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's out there. It's not out there. It just means that I didn't find it. But I do think it's worthwhile, and so I am going to tell you a joke. Right after filming the movie African Queen, Humphrey Bogart came down with this really weird disease, and he went to his local doctor, and his doctor just didn't really have a good grasp on what was going on, and he gave him some medications, but it didn't help, and so they sent him to a specialist, and the specialist really, hadn't seen this before, and so, ordered some tests to be done, and the tests came back, and the numbers were very odd, and they couldn't quite place what was going on. So, consulted with some colleagues, made some more referrals, but nothing was coming of this, and he still had this weird disease, and he really didn't know what to do, because all the best minds in the country were just baffled by this. And so, over some time, he heard about these two doctors in China that were supposed to be just truly brilliant doctors. And the first one was Dr. Ling, and Dr. Ling's thing was that he was constantly learning. He was constantly taking medical courses just all over the world. He spent half of his time just taking these courses and learning and going to experts and just absorbing everything they had to give him. And Eastern medicine, Western medicine, it didn't matter. He would learn it all. And so he kept all of his notebooks from these classes. He kept all of his notes, but he had just a fantastic memory, and so he was just one of the world's foremost experts on diseases. The other one was Dr. Ming. Now, Dr. Ming's weird thing was his whole family were doctors. His mother was a doctor, his father was a doctor. He had 2 sisters and 3 brothers, and they were all 5 of them were doctors, and he had an aunt that was a doctor, and 2 uncles that were doctors, and some cousins also that were doctors. And whenever he came across like a really weird case, he would like gather the family and they would review it together. And so a lot of times just all the different great minds looking at it from different angles would come across a solution. So Bogart contacted them, and they said, great, yeah, come on over, we'll be happy to take a look at you and see what we can do. And so he boarded the next boat to China and started heading out. Now, while he's on the sea, he's really bothered by this disease, and he's kind of tossing and turning at night, and he finally decides, like, okay, I'm going to go out to the deck to get some fresh air. And he goes out, and there's not many people out there, so he's just kind of watching the waves go, and all of a sudden this guy comes up to him and he goes, "Psst, buddy, check this out." And he opens this tiny little box, and inside was a flea. And Humphrey Bogart's like, "Yeah, so what? It's a flea." He goes, no, you don't understand, man. This flea is brilliant. This flea understands language, and not only understands language, but like understands more than multiple languages, and he follows commands. He's just this super intelligent flea. And Bogart's like, wow, that's fantastic. I've got to have this flea. How much is this flea? And the guy tells him, and he pays for the flea. Now, it turns out this flea was not a brilliant flea. In fact, as far as fleas go, the flea was even on the the not so smart side of the Flea spectrum of intelligence. But by the time Bogart figured this out, he'd already kind of become attached to the Flea, and so he decided to keep it. Now, time goes on. He's sitting on the boat. He's still going through, going over the ocean. The next night, same kind of thing. He's just restless. He's being bothered. He decides, all right, let me go to the galley and get some water. And so he goes. He gets some water. Open the freezer, gets some ice. Starts walking back to his cabin. He realizes, where's the Flea? Where's my Flea? And he realizes he's lost the Flea. So he runs back to his cabin, ransacks the room, goes through everything, can't find the Flea, and then he's like, wait a minute, where else? Wait a minute, the kitchen. Runs back to the kitchen, searches the kitchen, searches through the cabinets, finally opens up the freezer, and he finds the Flea frozen inside a piece of ice. So he pries the piece of ice out of the ice tray, swings around, trips over the mess that he's made because he's been ransacking the room, trips over the piece of ice, goes flying through the air, comes crashing down and shatters into a million pieces. Bogart is just distraught, and in his overwhelming grief, he grabs a matchbox and some tweezers and just picks up all the little bitty pieces of the Flea and puts it in the matchbox, puts it into his pocket, and leaves. And so the next day, they arrive at China, and he runs down the gangplank, and at the bottom, they're waiting for him, are Doctors Ling and Ming, and he's like, doctors, you have to help me. You have to help me put my Flea back together. My Flea has been shattered into a million pieces. And the doctors say, well, that we'd be happy to check your Flea for you, but first things first, let's take a look at you and see what the problem is, and so maybe that we can heal you. He's like, okay. And so they do a very thorough exam. They do some tests. They have all of his history. Ling goes to his notebooks. Ming goes to his family, consults the family. They come back together. They have an idea, and they put him into some treatment, and they heal him. Oh, did you want to know what happened to the Flea? Well, all of Ling's courses and all of Ming's kin couldn't put Humphrey's dumb Flea back together again.